Oh, hello, everybody. Just making sure that the audio and video are working, and we'll be starting in just over a minute. Okay, good. Somebody says sound is working. As usual, we'll start at the top of the hour. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhasa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhasa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhasa. So I'm going to continue today going through the fifth chapter of Sutta Nipata and using Sadatisa's translation uh, for the reading. This is the chapter on in the English title would be on the way to the beyond, and it's a series of questions from uh, 16 Brahmin students who came to see the Buddha. And we're going to start today with number 9 of the 16 at Todeya. The Brahmin student Todeya spoke next. What, sir, is the nature of freedom? He questioned the master. When one has no more desire for pleasure, goes beyond doubt, and lives without craving. The person who has no desire, said the Buddha, who has gone beyond doubt and who lives without craving, has indeed found the final freedom. For him, there is nothing more to be freed. So, Tudia's question, what is the nature of freedom, uh, is a good question, but it's a little bit odd because then he answers it himself immediately in the next sentence. There's no more desire for pleasure, goes beyond doubt, lives without craving. Freedom in Pali is vimutti, which literally means the breaking of chains, and it's used as a synonym for the final stage of the path and for the realization of nibbana, freedom from uh, craving and doubt and desire for pleasure is the definition given here. Uh, in the world, people often think freedom means the freedom to do whatever you want, but that's not real freedom. The real true freedom is the freedom from wanting, to have no wants, to have no desires, and to be beyond doubt, to be certain. So, so it's freedom from um, the dependent origination, essentially, because when there's no craving, then that the dependent origination is broken. It stops there, then and there. Todaya goes on, all-seeing Sakyan, please explain one other thing to me. I want to know how to recognize a wise man when I see him. Does the wise man still have any desire, or is he completely wishless? Does he still need to learn, or is his wisdom complete? A wise man, Todaya, said the Buddha, does not have desires, nor does he need to learn. He is wishless, he has wisdom, and you can recognize him because he is a man of nothing. He is not hanging on to pleasure or to being. So the wise man here is taken as a synonym for an arahant. Uh, he's a man of nothing. Uh, he has no he has no nothing that he identifies with. He is not hanging on to either pleasure or being. So these are the three types of craving that are identified in the dependent origination. The three types of tanha are the craving for sense pleasures, the craving for being, and the craving for non-being. And of these three, the craving for being is actually deeper than the desire for sense pleasures. For the ordinary person, the patujana in the world, in the human form, the desire for sense pleasures is the noisiest and creates the most disturbance in the mind, uh, and it demands the most attention. But it's actually superficial relative to the craving for being, which is much more fundamental and is only fully overcome by the arhat. So that's an indication of how profoundly deep in our psyche it is, the desire to be. The next set of questions comes from the Brahmin Kappa. Next was the Brahmin student Kappa. Sir, he said, there are people stuck midstream in the terror and fear of the rush of the river of being. The rush of the river of being and death and decay overwhelm them. For their sake, sir, let me tell me where to find an island. Tell me where there is solid ground beyond the reach of all the pain. So here he is comparing samsara essentially to a river, the river of being, and death and decay overwhelm being stuck in the middle. This is a powerful image. This is the nature of being stuck in samsara. Is like being in a raging river, just hurled about and coming to death and destruction. And he asks, where is there a safe, secure island? So obviously he's speaking metaphorically. Um, it's not meant to be taken literally. Kappa said the master, for the sake of those people stuck in the middle of the river of being, overwhelmed by death and decay, I will tell you where to find solid ground. There is an island which you cannot go beyond. It is a place of nothingness, a place of non-possession and of non-attachment. It is the total end of death and decay, and this is why I call it Nibbana, the extinguished, the cool. And the last two phrases, the extinguished, the cooler, in square brackets, indicating that they were added by the translator. He's explaining the meaning of Nibbana, which is that's quite close to the actual meaning. Nibbana literally means the extinguished. It's from the verb nibbeti, to put out, to extinguish. So a mundane, and it's like many nouns, abstract nouns in Pali, it's a past participle. So a mundane use of the word nibbana would be if someone asked, is that lamp in the other room still lit? And you said, no, it is extinguished. You would say, no, it is nibbana. And so when the Buddha talks about about nibbana as an island, he's obviously being poetic or metaphoric. We should not conceive of nibbana as some kind of special realm of being. It's beyond being and non-being. So it's not actually an island, but an island is a good metaphor for it. There is a really excellent book that was done some years ago by Ajahns Amaro and Passano, called The Island, which is a collection of many texts, both from the Pali Canon and from here and there from others like Thai masters, and some of their own commentary, all on the theme of nibbana. So it's a free distribution book. You can try and search for it. It's called The Island. It's a very excellent text. There's an island you cannot go beyond. There's nothing beyond nibbana. And the final stanza in this question: there are people who, in mindfulness, have realized this and are completely cooled here and now. They do not become slaves working for Mara, for death. They cannot fall into his power. One of the attributes of Mara is that his primary attribute is the Lord of Samsara, the tempter, but he's also equivalent to death, and that's actually the derivation of his name, because all beings who are caught in samsara are also subject to death. And this is a theme that comes up several times in these questions. How does one get beyond birth and death? This is the existential question. It's the fundamental question of our existence. We're caught between birth and death. And in the Buddhist worldview, it's even worse than that, because we're not only going to die once, but we're going to die again and again until we find our way out of this. Chatukani's question. This is number 11. Then the Brahmin student Jatukani spoke. I had heard, he said, that there was an ocean crosser, a hero desiring the deathless. And so I have come to ask a question of the man without desire. Tell me this, eye of instant seeing, knowing. What is the state of peace? Please explain it to me as it really is. What is the state of peace? Please explain it to me as it really is. You, Master, rule desire and pleasure like the sun, with heat and light, rules and controls the earth. I have only a little understanding, sir, and you are a globe full of wisdom. Tell me how to find and know the way of giving up this world of births and agings. So again, the fundamental question, how to get beyond birth and death. Well, here it's phrased as birth and aging. And he compares the Buddha to the sun. And we see that elsewhere, that one of the titles that's sometimes given to the Buddha is kinsman of the sun. There was an old myth that the Sakyan, the royal family of Sakya, were one of their ancestors was actually the sun god. Lose the greed for pleasure. This is the Buddha's reply. Lose the greed for pleasure. See how letting go of the world is peacefulness. There is nothing you need to hold on to, and there is nothing you need to push away. Nothing you need to hold on to, and nothing you need to push away. And dry up the remains of your past and have nothing for your future. If you do not cling to the present, then you can go from place to place in peace. So never mind the past, never mind the future, and don't cling to the present. No. And then you can go from place to place in peace. There's a Tibetan, this reminds me of a Tibetan practice, the yoga of the 3 times. You contemplate that the past is unreal because it has ceased to exist. The future is unreal because it is not yet manifest. And the present is unreal because it cannot be fixed. I've lost my, oh, here we are. There is a greed that fixes on the individual body mind. When this greed has completely gone, then Brahman, there will be no more inner poison drive, without which you are immune from death. And so that here he's identifying, the Buddha is identifying um, the self view, the identification with the organism, the body mind, as a form of craving. Usually we describe this as a view, but it is also a form of craving. If you're caught in self view, then there's a greediness directed towards the self that that it then becomes a source of both desire and of fear. And when you let go of this is like the magic bullet. Then all the other defilements fade away, and you become immune from death. Uh, all these questions this week are pretty short ones. The last one for this week is Badra Wuda's question. Student Brahman Badra Wuda spoke next. I have come, he said, to ask a question, thirstbreaker, wishless, free, and wise, beyond time and home, life and pleasure. Please, ocean crosser, for all the different people here who have come from different places to listen to your words, tell us the way that you have found and known. The master replied, there is in taking things a thirst, a clinging, a grasping. You must lose it. You must lose it altogether, above, below, around, and within. It makes no difference what it is you are grasping at. When a man grasps, Mara stands behind him. Therefore, the monks, realizing this, should not grasp at anything, being mindful. You should see the beings that are creatures of attachment as tied to the power of death. Well, that second last paragraph, that's really powerful. There is in taking things a thirst, a clinging, a grasping. You must lose it. You must lose it altogether, above, below, around, and within. It makes no difference what it is you are grasping at. When a man grasps, Mara stands behind him. This is a repeated theme throughout these question and answers in this Wagga, um, that we have to let go of all desire, whatever for whatever object, above, below, outside, internal, whatever. And it doesn't make any difference what the object of desire is. It is desire itself that is the problem. And letting go of desire, then one is free. And one can get beyond birth and death and can reach the safe, secure refuge of Nibbana. This is the phrasing of the third noble truth, actually, that Nibbana is realized when craving is relinquished. So it's very central. It's really the central core practice. And then we saw in one of the readings today that even the false view of a self, the self view, is identified in this passage with a form of craving or greed. So it was pretty short this week. There were four of them, all very short, and we have one more week on this one more week on this text. Maybe 2 weeks, because I'll see how it goes, because there's also an epilogue to this. Okay, so I'll stop there and see what we have for questions. Let's see. What is meant by neutral feelings? How will they affect the mind? Neutral feeling is, well, first of all, more generally, what is a Vedana? What is a feeling? It's the immediate reaction of the mind as it processes some incoming information, sense data. One of the steps in the process is a emotive reaction that we either feel pleasant or unpleasant or just neutral. Um, so it is a form of, it's classed as Vedana, but it's hard for us to see because it isn't strong like pain or pleasure, but it's one of the ways in which we parse objects. And they could also say that the feelings are on a spectrum, and it's kind of obvious that there can be intensely painful feeling, for example, or it can be just a mild irritation. So it's, and same with pleasure. Uh, so uh, there's a gray area in the middle that we can consider to be neutral, but there are some that are dead center that are neither pleasant nor unpleasant, just neutral feeling. They affect the mind in that if you're not aware of them, if you're aware of them, that's good. Then you just carry on. If you're aware of the fact that you're neutral, but uh, they lead to dullness and boredom. Boredom is a symptom of being unaware of neutral feelings. Uh, Not really Tibetan, it's Sautrantika. I suppose you're referring to the yoga of the three times. Yeah, okay. Thank you for that. I did see it in a Tibetan source, but I know Tibetans use Sautrantika as a source for their teachings. So, I believe you. What is the difference between awareness and consciousness? Well, consciousness, well, okay, first of all, I'll say that defining English terms is problematic because everybody means something different by them. They're not as technically precise as Pali terms. Um, so someone may use awareness in a way that is equivalent to how I would use consciousness. But in Pali terms like sati and chitta have precise meanings. So my own use of those terms, I would equate awareness with sati and consciousness with chitta or vijnana. So chitta or vijnana, those are in different contexts. Those are referred to the subjective or knowing aspect of mind. So it's a significant, uh, core part of our being. Whereas sati is a quality. It's a mental state or a virtue that we develop of having keen uh, keen awareness, recollectedness. Second question from the same person: how is it possible to reconcile mythology and science? It's not, and I don't think it really you need to, or I have a hard time understanding why people want to. In suttas, one way to attain nibbana is to go to jhanas 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the mind emerging from jhana attain to liberation. How can we attain to liberation as upon emerging from fourth jhana, as mentioned in the suttas? The idea is that going through the jhanas purifies the mind, and then emerging from jhana, you take the state of mind itself, like emergence from jhana. So you take that as the object. So you're essentially applying vipassana immediately upon emergence from jhana, and the mind is at the optimal state to be able to accomplish the goal immediately after jhana. You cannot develop vipassana while in jhana, but the state immediately emerging from jhana is the optimal. If the asuras are just older gods of Tawatingsa, then are they just a peculiarity of our world system, or are they present in every world system? I don't think there's a definitive answer to that, but I would think that the general trend or tone of the texts around the world systems, they probably all have asuras, because the world systems all seem to be very similar. There's not a lot of of detail or discussion about other world systems, except to say their physical structure. They all have a Mount Sinaru in the middle, and the four islands, and a ring wall. So there's an implication they're all very similar to each other, if not identical. So I would think they no doubt exist in every world system. I would think that more likely than not. Do Arupa gods experience their lives as individual beings with a self, or just experience empty space the whole time and nothing else? Well, the Arupa beings, they're the beings who are formless beings. They have no bodies. They're mind only, and they're qualified as four aggregate beings. And it's also said that if they are not sotapannas already before they attain that state, then they cannot attain sotapannahood in the Arupa realm. So that would mean, if they're not sotapannas, that would mean they still have a self view. And if they have four aggregates, that would mean they still have some kind of mental formation. It's hard to imagine what their mental life is actually like, but I don't think they're devoid of a self view unless they're already enlightened before they get there. Next one. Speaking of feelings, emotions, negative or positive, what should one do with the occasional intense and negative feelings that don't appear to be tied to a particular thought? Only mindfulness. Well, first of all, mindfulness first and foremost, and some introspection, some mindful introspection to examine that, because the intense and negative feeling doesn't appear to be tied to a particular thought, as you say, but it will have arisen because of some impact on consciousness. So it's sometimes a good exercise to try and trace your thought patterns backwards. Like if you find yourself thinking some weird thing out of the blue, say, well, what was I thinking just before that? And so on, back and back, and try and figure out what started it. And it often ends up being some kind of sense impression will trigger a train of thought and just spin out. So it's the same with a feeling. That didn't come from nowhere. There's a cause and condition for everything. And the feeling is tied to something in the mind or the body. And it'd be useful to try and trace back and disentangle that. Can you be reborn as a tree? No, not as a tree, but you could be reborn as a dewa that lives in a tree. The 3 times theory you spoke about is very interesting. Seems like time is a concept of the mind. Thank you, Bhante. There are different views in different schools of Buddhism about the nature of time. The Sarvastivada school, that's their signature teaching, actually, is that all times are equally real. Next question. How would the unconditioned work in the Sarvastivada tradition, where objects of consciousness are going through the timeless chitta like a film reel or something? Oh, it would be an escape from that film reel. It would be an end to that process. it really doesn't. The nature of nibbana would not be affected, whatever theory you have about the nature of time, because nibbana is outside of time altogether. You said there is a realm of rebirth with no consciousness and with statue bodies. Are they in Naroda Sampati for that time? No, they're not. They're in a different state that was developed by some yogis in India that uh, suppressed perception and consciousness. But it wasn't a realization like Naroda Sampati. It was just a suppression. So it's something the Buddha said not to do, and you end up being reborn in this mindless realm. I'm trying not to let the cold hinder me. What are some meditative techniques to use for this? Uh, Awareness of the body, bodily sensations. Just notice the sensation of cold, or the sensation of heat. Just and try to develop a neutral noticing. This is just a sensation, and not to let the mind uh, spin off into self pity or misery about it, but just this is a sensation of cold. Is there any other characteristic other than the three? If yes, what is the other characteristic of sukha and dukkha? Well, there's many characteristics that these three, dukkha, anicca, and anatta, are the important ones, and they're the ones that are common to all dhammas, to all phenomena. But each each phenomena that arises will have its own particular characteristics by which we define it. And like the practice of vipassana is to eventually cut through the particular and notice the universal more and more. If dhammas did not have particular characteristics, they would all be the same. But obviously, there's physical, there's mental, there's intense and subtle, there's hot and cold, and so on. I spend most of my day watching videos on the phone, such as Dhamma talks and random stuff. What would you recommend? Recommendation of getting over this addiction and to the path of doing more inner work. You could do a media fast. Put your phone away completely for a period of time, a week or 2 weeks, and don't even check it for anything. Just turn it off, put it away in a drawer, and ignore it. You can live without that. What are the characteristics of beings that take birth in Naraya, such as what they look like or the types of bodies they have? Naraya are the hell realms in Buddhism, and they have a wide variety of physical forms. Some of them look quite monstrous, like a human body with a bird's head is one that's described, or and the types of suffering they have are also extremely varied, from burning to piercing to being thrown into filth and so on. There are basically two categories of beings in Naraya. There's the Naraya Sata, who are the beings whose evil deeds in a human form have led them to rebirth there to suffer. And they're the Naraya Apala, or the guardians of hell, or the wardens. And they also are there because of bad karma, but they're the ones who perform the tortures. And there was a debate in early Buddhism. It's one of the ones listed in the Katawatu, whether the hell wardens, the Narayapala, are actually real beings, or they're just illusions that are created for this facilitate the suffering of the beings there. The Theravada took the position they were real beings, but some other schools took the position they were just illusions. Why did the Mahabrahma free from the armies of Mara? Why does Mara have an army from the highest sensual heaven that are free from all conflict? The use of the word army is perhaps somewhat figurative, or because they're not really meant to fight against an enemy, but they're like his lackeys or his assistants, other devas from that same realm who follow him as their leader. Mahabrahma fled from him because although he's immune from sense desire, he's not immune from a false view and from desire for being. So he's not completely, and this comes up in the sutta where the Buddha goes to see Baka the Brahma, that Mara still has some limited sway, even as high as the first Brahma realm. But you'll also notice in the description of that encounter that while the other devas fled precipitously, Brahma withdrew in a more controlled manner, and he took time to plant a banner on the edge of the world. So he wasn't symbolizing he's not giving up entirely. Is it appropriate to ask what type of meditation you practice? I generally don't know if it's a question one can ask. Yeah, that's actually a question I could answer. And that varies with time. Currently, I'm doing a lot of anapanasati. I also like doing, and in the last few years, I've picked up doing devanusati, contemplation of devas. And in previous years, I did more of vipassana, and from time to time I'll do metta or karuna. So there's a variety of meditations. What is the relation between nibbana and sila? Well, sila is required as part of the Eightfold Path. To realize nibbana, one has to fulfill the Eightfold Path, all 8 factors. So without sila, without keeping sila, one will not realize nibbana. Is Yama classed as a god of Tawatingsa? Why does he need to make judgment for beings going to Naraya if rebirth is just a natural result of karma? What if Yama stops doing his job and gets lazy? If you'll read the passage in the Majjhima about Yama, it's evident that he's not really happy in his job, and he's like a functionary. He seems to have a kind of a bureaucratic role of just formalizing because he even says, you were brought here by your karma. So it's a very kind of formulaic entrance that beings take into that realm. He's not from Tawatingsa. He's not really associated with any of the heaven worlds, but he is classed as a deva, and it's clear that he's unhappy with his position and wants to get reborn elsewhere. So it's some bad karma from him being born there. I saw a book once. It was like an illustrated book about hell realms. It was made. I'm not sure where it was made, but the text was all in Chinese. and I don't read Chinese, but I could see the illustrations, and it was almost a comic book, like there were multiple illustrations, and the way that was portrayed in that book was hell was very bureaucratic. It was like these kind of mandarins that were ruling the place with books and scrolls of paper, just processing everybody through it in a bureaucratic manner. Attempting to remain in equanimity can be challenging when dealing with others. It can be difficult to not get affected by others' attitudes. What are your thoughts on this? Yes, for sure. That's a challenge. That's where the practice comes in. That you try and maintain your center, and it if you're it takes some degree of skill and mastery to be able to remain centered and calm when other people around you are getting upset or very emotional. But you'll actually be able to deal with the situations much better. Uh, since the time of the last Buddha, have we been on the same downslope? Um, yes, yes. The idea is that the Buddha arose. The world was already on on the downslope in terms of the cycles of this is a cosmological history, that there are these cycles of humanity from very long lived to very short lived, and it depends on the morality. And when the Buddha arises, um, he saves many beings, and they're able to be reborn or escape rebirth. And the downward slide continues, and the Dhamma slowly disappears as well until it's lost altogether. When a being attains a nibbana, is it like a person who wakes up from a dream where everything experienced in samsara was unreal? So non-existing or non-existing don't make sense that way. That's probably not a bad analogy. Does an arahant have complete control of the mind? Yes, that's one of the characteristics defined of an arahant, that he thinks only what he wishes to think and not what he doesn't want to think. He is the master of the pathways of his mind. Couldn't that count as their self? Since one of the important ideas of identifying a self is you have control over it. No, it's not the same thing. It's that the mind is so purified that it doesn't run off on tangents, chasing after ghosts and fragments of memory and so on. But it's very clear. So any thinking that's done is purposeful and directed. Can you reach stream entry practicing alone without guidance from a teacher or living in a monastery? Yeah, I think it is possible. It would be harder, but I don't think I think it is possible. How is the Buddha in Nibbana when he speaks? That well, I think that's the kind of question it's really impossible to answer. We can't know the mind of a Buddha, but I think the general idea is that he has realized Nibbana, but while he's still alive, he's not constantly immersed in it moment to moment completely, or he wouldn't be able to act and speak. What is the name of your book on cosmology? It's The Buddhist Cosmos. Can it be ordered on Amazon? At present, I'm having some issue with Amazon. For some reason, they took the print version off their page, and I got their tech support guy, and he wasn't sure why, and I'm waiting for them to figure it out. Some error on their side. You can still get a free PDF version or a Kindle version on my website, but the print version is not available at the moment. Hopefully, it will come back soon. It was on Amazon, and Amazon still has the Kindle version up. Can you tell us something about birds incarnating in humans and having weak bodies and dying young? Is it only birds who do this? I'm not sure where you got that from. I don't recall that particular connection. That may be a particular folk belief in some Buddhist countries. What I have heard more commonly is that people who have a very delicate health and um, they have a lot of uh, sort of chronic and hard to diagnose ailments. There sometimes have been dewas in their past life, and they're not fully comfortable in the human form. They're sort of their frequency is not completely adjusted to the human form, so the human form doesn't work properly. If jhanas are what result in rebirth as a Brahma god, then what kind of rebirth does the practice of Brahma Vihara result in? Brahma Viharas also are said to result in rebirth in Brahma realm. What about other practices like breath meditation, corpse meditation, etc.? Well, breath meditation can lead to jhana, so that would also be in the Brahma worlds. Corpse meditation would, the intention is to diminish sensuality. So that would be an aid to it escaping from the samsaric existence altogether. Although it can't on its own, it can't lead to enlightenment. It can diminish the craving for sense pleasures enough that then it becomes easier. Would in formless realm, would empty space be considered a body of a formless being? No, it's never described as that because the formless beings do not are said to have no body whatsoever. They're just pure mind. But the first level of that, the beings of boundless space, there is still a very weak continuous connection to physicality, in that space itself is considered part of the rupa kanda. But beyond that, there's no physicality at all. Can someone live everyday life in vipassana state of mind? It depends what you mean by that. I don't think it would be possible to have that, to be going about ordinary life and many duties and interactions and maintain a very sharp momentary mindfulness. But one can have like a general mindfulness and sampajanya in everyday life, and one should be trying for that, to be mindful of in general. I think every imagination we have can be an image of a real world system. Is that true? I don't think that's necessarily true. Possibly. It's not. That's not. That's a kind of an out there idea that I wouldn't either subscribe to it or deny it. I would be kind of open to that, but I don't think it's necessarily true. It's said there were 500 Pachika Buddhas before the Buddhist time. Since Buddhism is almost non-existent in India, but ascetics still exist, do you think there are still new Pachika Buddhas these days? No. According to the orthodox theory of Pachika Buddhas, as long as the Buddhist teaching exists in the world, then there cannot be a Pachika Buddha. So although it's died out in India, it hasn't died out in the world. Why does the Buddha deny being omniscient in MN Majjhima Nikaya 71? Um, he denied being omniscient because he wasn't omniscient in the sense of omniscience as claimed by some other teachers who said that they knew and understood everything in the universe at all times. This is the omniscience of the Buddha or otherwise is something that ended up being quite a controversy in early Buddhism to define exactly what the limits of the Buddha's knowledge was. I think the wisest answer is we don't really know. We can't really imagine the mind of a Buddha. But what it came down to in the late commentarial period, the definition that was settled on, which is not claimed by the Buddha, but this is what the tradition settled on, was that although the Buddha didn't know everything all at once, he could know anything he put his mind to. And they give the example of the number of fish in the Ganges. Although, he didn't start knowing the number of fish in the Ganges. If for some reason he wanted to know that, all he had to do was put his mind onto it and he would know it. What state or realm when consciousness is suddenly in infinite space, no body, only heightened consciousness with thought? That sounds like formless abiding, the first formless abiding. What requirements or qualities enable one to have such a state? Purification of mind and good, excellent samadhi. Is it possible for a being to be omniscient? No, not according to the Theravada idea. Would a Deva be interested in my path or the path of any human? Now, probably not. There are a few stories in the Samyutta Nikaya, particularly, where Devas take some interest in the practice of a monk and give him some advice. But it seems to be very rare, and it would only be someone who's really close to the goal. And in one of these suttas, when the Deva gave a short word of advice to a monk, and the monk thanked him and asked the Deva to help him at any time he wants in the future. He invited him, you guide me, help me anytime you want. And the Deva got a little annoyed at that and said, "You have to do your own thing. I'm not your shepherd or your caretaker. You do you. Don't bother me." I liken the ego or ruminative reflexive consciousness to an illusion, like making circular motions in a dark room with a cigar, making the illusion of a circle. Thoughts on this metaphor? Is this what I mean by saying that something's not real does not mean it has no existence? Yeah, it's actually not a bad illusion, not a bad metaphor, that illusion of a circle. And that when we say things are real or not, that's a slippery definition. Because one definition was that something is real if it can act as a cause, if it can have effect. That was an Indian philosophical definition, but even that is sort of problematic because something totally unreal can still have an effect. Somebody might have a belief in something that doesn't exist, and that can affect their behavior. Why does the permanent extinguishing of the three poisons lead to experience of the unconditioned? Because it's the three poisons are the only thing that keep us in samsara, and when they're eliminated, extinguished, then the mind naturally goes into the unconditioned because it's no longer grasping at the conditioned. Samsara is, in the last analysis, something we do, something we choose moment by moment. And the only other alternative is nibbana, the unconditioned. So when we stop doing samsara, then we realize nibbana. What is sunyata in Theravada tradition? Is it the same as in Mahayana? I think it's essentially the same thing. It's the non-substantive nature, a lack of any real substance in phenomena. Okay. Uh, Maybe take one or two more questions, and then we'll call it. Is it possible for a Dewa to speak with human uh, because of the vast difference in their lifespan? Their pace are very different. Our life is very fast for them. There are rare instances of Dewas interacting with humans, but generally they don't. And that difference in time span is an important factor. Why do we lose our memories from life to life? I think I'll answer that one and call it for the evening. We lose our memories from life to life because of the trauma of death and um, the time spent in the womb and then birth. So Dewas who don't have a traumatic birth experience, they just appear. They commonly remember their immediately preceding life. Uh, Humans don't, because they've gone through this very traumatic transition, and it kind of wipes out any memories they might have had. Uh, there are some stories about uh, beings that are reborn, human beings that are reborn satimat, which means fully mindful or aware, and the implication is they remember their previous past life. They make the transition seamlessly, but that's exceedingly rare. Okay, I'll take my leave, and we'll catch you next week.